You're listening to Psych Up on the Casozo Radio Network. And now your host, psychologist and author, Dr. Suzanne Phillips.
Welcome to Psych Up on Casozo Radio. I'm Dr. Suzanne Phillips, host of Psych Up. My goal and the goal of my guests is to discuss any and all topics from a psychological perspective. Together with you, the listener, we want to share information, invite curiosity, and essentially make you an expert in your own life. We hear a lot these days about self-branding. What does that really mean? In the most basic way, we can think of it as what comes to mind when someone hears your name. It might be they would think, funny guy, that guy's tech smart, she's a drama queen, he's a great teacher, she's everybody's mother, she's the life of the party, he's a loyal friend. As you can glimpse, self-branding has relevance for us in both our personal and professional lives. Today, we are going to demystify self-branding. We're going to make it a usable concept that can improve your personal and professional success. To help us do this, we are welcoming back marketing and social media expert, Dr. Joel Evans. In November, Dr. Evans offered us a wonderful show entitled Social Media, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You can access that on the Casozo site. You can access it as a podcast on your iPhones. Just search Psych Up under podcasts, and you'll find that show. Dr. Evans is the RMI Distinguished Professor in the Zarb School of Business at Hofstra University in New York. He's the co-author of two major books, Marketing, for which he's preparing the 12th edition, and Retail Management, A Strategic Approach, which is headed into its 13th edition. Both of these are used nationally and internationally, and they're available in English, Chinese, and Russian. Dr. Evans consults for a number of firms. He's been interviewed in many media formats, newspapers, magazines, radio, TV, online. Professor Evans has been following social media for the past 10 years and teaching it on a graduate level to master's and MBA students. He writes 2 blogs weekly on marketing and retailing with worldwide following, 2 Twitter accounts, and manages the LinkedIn accounts for the marketing and international business departments of Hofstra University's Zarb School. Dr. Evans has particular interest and expertise in self-branding. He's written about it. He's offered professional seminars, and it is one of the special new areas he has a great passion for and that he addresses with all his students, from undergraduates to executive MBA students. Dr. Joel Evans, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to Psych Up.
Thank you. I appreciate that warm introduction.
Okay, thanks so much. Let's start. I know when you speak about self-branding, you say it involves 3 important aspects. I wonder if you could share that.
Well, the first aspect is us trying to determine what our self-brand is. What are we? What attributes do we consist of? The second part is then trying to convert those attributes that make us up into the message or the persona that we'd like to project to other people. What do we want other people to think about us or know about us? And then the third part is the way that people actually perceive us, which may or may not be consistent with the way that we want them, that way that we perceive ourselves and the way that we want them to perceive us.
You know, when you say that, I think of people who say, I'm low maintenance, and no one thinks they're low maintenance. That's not exactly how people perceive them. So I can see that one of the dilemmas here is A, knowing who you are and somehow coming up with a way to let other people know that aspect of you, and then wondering how, in fact, it's being conveyed and if it's being conveyed.
In the way that we intend, yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. Let's start with personal self-branding, and we can bring those 3 aspects into it. How does a person even think about self-branding? What are the kind of steps I could take if let's say I wanted to write a personal profile for an online dating service? What would I even think about?
That's a good example, by the way, because that's a self-branding. One of the things about self-branding is that it's situational. So the way you're going to describe yourself for a dating site is going to be different than the way you want your friends to perceive you. But the first thing that we really have to do is to understand what we are. What are the attributes that we'd like to convey to other people? What I like to do as an exercise when I talk is to say to people, I give them a pad and a pencil, and I actually say to them, write down 5 to 10 words that describe you, so that if you were interacting with your friends, what are the 5 or 10 things that you would like them to see about you? And if you were in a career situation, what are 5 or 10 attributes that you want to make sure you get across to a potential employer? So it's really trying, and this is a great exercise for self-assessment, because most of us don't do that. Most of us don't have an idea really of what the attributes are that we stand for. We may have this hodgepodge of attributes that we think comprise us, but most of us don't think about it in a systematic way in terms of who we are, how we're presenting ourselves, and how we're received. So I think the first thing that we have to do is to come up with some key words that would describe us and would describe us in a way that we'd like to be perceived.
Well, you know what you pick up there that I think is very true, and that is we tend not to see ourselves as multidimensional. So I can picture someone saying, I'm a nice guy, and missing out that he's also very creative, very friendly, organized, very loyal. I mean, so I guess when you start to think of 5 key words, it almost fosters you thinking about yourself in a kind of multidimensional way.
Right. It's like a whole person or a gestalt. But I want to reiterate it again that it's situational. So those 5 words are the way you want to be perceived. You talked about online dating. That's a totally different persona than you would want to have at work, or that you would have with your close friends or your family. You know, there are different attributes that you would want them to focus on.
Well, here's where that discrepancy is very big with online dating, and I'm sure some of our listeners are interested in this. I think when people start to write their profiles, let's call it their self-brand profile, instead of them really focusing on themselves, Dr. Evans, they are trying to second guess what someone else would want. So
Right.
someone's saying, I'm very adventurous. And I say, are you really very adventurous? Well, I would want to ski. Do you ski? No. Okay, so in other words, there is a flip in which the focus is on what someone wants, and it cuts through the authenticity because the focus is not on really their own attributes.
Right, and what they're doing is they're creating a false brand, which means that if the two people do communicate or do meet, there's going to be a major disconnect because it's not who they are.
It's like when
So
I said
we have to be authentic when we come up with these keywords or attributes or this persona that we'd like others to see us. It can't be something that we're creating, as you said. It can't be something that it's because we think other people want to hear it.
Yes, it can't be fictional.
It's got to be genuine. It's got to be genuine.
Well, the best example is someone who wanted to put down she was a biker, motorcycle biker. I go, are you a biker? No. But I once rode bikes with my dad. I go, well, I think you're gonna draw a big biking crowd here. I mean, it's just what you say. If it's not your authentic self, the match can't possibly really work. But
we also do that all the time because we want to be liked.
Yes.
We want to be admired. We want to be respected. We want to get the job.
Okay, so let's do the alternative. What are the kinds of things, if you make yourself that person for a minute, what are the kinds of things that you would think about? Okay,
so this is where, again, I talk to people, and I talk to them a lot about that. If we're talking about a professional setting, a resume, but you could almost argue that you could have a life resume that is similar in concept but different in purpose.
Okay, let's go with the personal one. Yeah, let's start with the personal.
So we have an inventory of attributes that we'd like to have, and then we've got a set of experiences that we have conducted, personality attributes that we have, and we want to pick out the ones that are there that represent, actual. So let's suppose that you want to interact with somebody and you say you love travel. Well, that's one where if you traveled a lot, that's a perfect, icebreaker and a way to talk to one another. It's looking at your attributes, your experiences, and playing on those.
So your passions, if you come from a big family and you love people, you would put that down. If you really were a very active person and you were a biker or a runner or a kayaker, you would in fact say athletic. If you were a great reader and you loved fiction and nonfiction, or you loved mysteries, so you're saying really take a look at what your passions are in addition to your experiences.
Right, and understand that just because we use the words doesn't mean that the person gets the full message. So you use biking as an example. Suppose I put down avid biker, and I really was an avid biker, but what does that mean? Am I a member of Hell's Angels? Am I does
Right.
that part of it, obliterate just my saying that I like the freedom and the air and, being out on the road? So there are a lot of different connotations that are with these attributes. And even if you use the word passion, so you're saying that I'm passionate. How do you then demonstrate that you're passionate so that the person gets that you really are? And none of us, in all honesty, is passionate about everything. We're passionate about certain things. We're passionate about sports. We're passionate about politics. We're passionate about social media, whatever it may be. But we're not passionate about every single one of them. So what we have to do is convey that we're passionate about certain things. So we now see people all of a sudden, because America's in the World Cup, they're becoming passionate about soccer.
Okay, so I can see why this is really not such an easy thing to do, because in some ways, because in some ways you're trying to look at the things that represent you and then in some way convey them so they have some clarity of meaning. So I might be more likely to say, if I love nature, I'm a free spirit who loves nature and not just I'm a biker. Or if rather than I'm a passionate person, that I'm passionate about classical music and I get passionate about most things that I do. So that in some ways, the clarity with which we're starting with 5 key words to get us thinking, but actually in self-branding, whether it was for a personal online profile or even in talking about yourself on that first date or even with friends, because some people really want to know how to talk socially with a little bit more comfort about themselves. This is a good jumping off point for those folks, too, who are a little bit socially cautious, and that is to think of, well, do you really love walking your dog? Do you really love the beach? That is, when you love something, people generally want to hear about it.
That is correct. But again, we could be misperceived a lot. If I can, let me tell a personal story or two here.
Good.
I'm a big guy. I'm now a lot older than I was when I started teaching at Hofstra back in the 1970s. So when I interact with students, and I always wear a jacket and tie because I'm from the business school and I believe that I should represent business. So when I go in there, I get that I can be intimidating to students. Yet, I really see myself as a lovable, student-oriented guy. I help them with their resumes. I help them with their self-branding, with everything else. But there's a certain, the way I have a certain look, and it's been told to me enough times that I believe I'm being pensive and I'm thinking and I'm listening, and they view it that they look at me and see that I'm being hostile, which is the hostile or arrogant, which is the furthest thing from what I want to be. So what have I done? I go in, and yes, I'm wearing a suit, but I'm also wearing a Mickey Mouse tie. I'll show a lot of cartoons. I'll make fun of myself. I'll make fun of my bald spot or whatever. In one of my classes, they thought I was so intense that I ended up drawing a frowny face and a smiley face on the board. And underneath the frowny face, I wrote, "This is how you perceive me." And under the smiley face, I wrote down, "This is how I want you to perceive me." And the whole dynamics of the class changed after that.
Had they told
laughed
you,
and then they got it.
Had they told you they perceived you as stern and kind of very serious, Joel, how did you know that that's how they perceived you?
Okay, we have student comments that come back to us,
Okay.
and 99% of them, I'm this perfectionist type. 99% of it is great guy, best teacher I ever had, whatever. And then there'll be two in there out of all of my classes that'll say, condescending, arrogant, whatever. And I look at that and I say, where are they getting that from? And I've heard from people, I look so stern. I look like I'm angry, and I'm saying I'm not angry. I'm really just thinking. So it's something that, there are some attributes that we have that are very hard to change, because if that's what I'm doing is thinking, then that's my thinking look. I'm not trying to be hostile. I'd like to tell another story, which is we were interviewing a candidate for dean about 20 years ago, and I was on the committee, and after an interview of somebody, one of my colleagues came up to me and said, even if you don't like the candidate, you shouldn't scowl at them. It's not polite. And I said, what? I said, that was my favorite candidate out of all the candidates. So we see ourselves in a certain way. I see myself as being serious, pensive, thinking, and I'm perceived as, being miserable or unhappy. So some things are very hard for us to do. So that's why I use a lot of humor in my interactions, personal and non-personal, because I think that humor changes that perception of me.
Well, what you say, also saying it's such a great take-home message is when you become aware that there's a discrepancy between the way you want to perceive and your authentic feeling, if you're authentically feeling like I'm enjoying this class, I'm very impressed by this candidate, and people are seeing you or experiencing you as different, you didn't fight it. What you did is sort of recognize it and then come up with ways to address it. I mean, it's the use of feedback.
And we also have to recognize, and I'm in a profession where I'm interacting with a lot of people, that as much as we like, everybody isn't going to love us. We have to carve out that self-brand, do the best job that we can in interacting with people, both personally and professionally, but that doesn't mean that we're going to win everybody over, because everybody else is coming from their own experience set and their own set of strengths and insecurities.
It's such a great point. The need to be loved by everyone is definitely a trap. We're going to have to take a break. You've been listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio. We're here with Dr. Joel Evans, self-branding expert. We're demystifying self-branding tonight. We want to make it into a usable concept. We'll be right back.
Dr. John Wyckoff at the Wyckoff Wellness Center in East Lansing specializes in helping you build good health rather than just masking the symptoms of illness and disease. We know it's nearly impossible to obtain the necessary levels of key nutrients from the types of food available to us today. So Dr. Wyckoff has experienced dramatic results for his patients by introducing IV therapy as part of an overall natural health and wellness program. The use of vitamins and nutrients delivered directly into the vein are proven to treat and prevent headaches, chronic fatigue, cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, shingles, and much more. Experience those results for yourself. Take advantage of the Energy IV Boost Special. Receive one IV infusion for just $39.99, and those are regularly $79.99. Boost your energy, improve your health naturally. Visit wyckoffwellness.com or call 800-471-0255, 800-471-0255, or wyckoffwellness.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio. Tonight our show is on self-branding. We're here with Dr. Joel Evans from the Hofstra Business School. He's a social media expert, a marketing expert. And Dr. Evans, we were just talking about, it's not so easy, but it's crucial to really think about your own self-brand in the sense of the dimensions that are authentic to you and how you portray them. And I know you've spoken about the do's and don'ts with thinking through and creating a self-brand. I wonder if you could share some of those with us.
Sure. I think first and foremost is to be a positive person, there really is something to that adage of the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. People really don't want to interact with people who are either negative all the time or down on themselves or down on their job, that what they do is they criticize where they work. No one wants to hear that on a regular basis. So I think we have to look at the way life is, the things that we can be positive about. I think we also, sometimes people are reticent or shy in terms of, explaining some of the things they've done. We all know people who are loud and obnoxious and they want the whole world to know every single minor detail that
Yes.
they've done. But there are probably 90% of the people in the world who are quiet and don't convey that.
Yes,
so I think we have to be more of an advocate or talk about the things we've done, and as long as we're not overpowering, other people like to hear that. If you've gone on an exciting safari or some trip, people like to see that.
I
They don't
can't
wanna be
agree with
bored
you
with-
more.
They don't want to be bored with an hour slideshow. What they usually want to hear.
Right. But you're so right on this one, because historically, people will tell you that they hold back because they've been told, don't brag about yourself, don't toot your own horn, no one likes a braggart. And the sad part, I'm so glad you brought this one up, is that there is a big, big difference between sharing something wonderful that happened and making the rest of the audience feel one down by bragging. They are very different dynamics. So I love that you put that in, both in the people's personal lives and friendships, and in the professional world. People want you to sell yourself, and just naturally by being confident and sharing some of that. So that's a great one to include. What else can we include in the do's?
Okay. Body language, as we know, is a big deal, but this is part of self-branding too. When we present ourselves standing up straight instead of slumping over, sitting in a normal way in a chair and not lounging, so not frowning, not while somebody else is talking, putting our hand on our head on our hand. Being a good listener and an empathizer. So yeah, we want to get our accomplishments across too, but nobody wants to sit there for an hour and listen to somebody else's story alone. They want to be asked, where are you going, or what are you doing, or what's happening that's exciting in your life. So we have to be empathetic and listen and encourage people to talk about themselves, not just us.
One of the things that we know about, being an empathic listener is often being able to state back, so you've traveled a lot. I mean, if someone's saying, I've been to Africa, or I've been to Asia, I have a trip to New Zealand planned, and you don't say anything, that's a very different response than saying, my goodness, what have these places been like? I mean, the interest and curiosity, sometimes people say to me, socially, they're not sure what to say. And I've always said one wonderful position you can always take is curiosity. A, it's usually authentic, and B, people do like to share. The other thing with body language, and I know you and I have talked about it, and we're going to be speaking about social media and its impact on branding, is if while someone's talking, you're checking your text messages, well, that's a message of disinterest.
Yes, that's part of body language and being a good listener and empathizer. Nobody feels good about that. Mm-hmm. I think we also have to be clear about the attributes we want other people to remember about us. We have to emphasize those. And the last thing that I would have as a do is that in doing our assessment of ourselves, and sometimes it really hurts to actually think about ourselves in this way, is that we have to recognize some of the strengths. Some of the weaknesses that we have, things that we may have heard back from other people, things that we recognize in ourselves. And while some may not be possible to change, others are possible to change. So we really need to recognize some of the weaknesses that we have that we can do a better job at.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes being authentic about them really lightens it a little. I inevitably go into the bank, and they know that they teach at the college, and they know who I am, but they also know I can't add. So when I go in, I say, ladies, please check this row of numbers because you know me, and they all laugh. But the fact is, I'm a word person. I'm not a math person. I mean, basic adding, but nonetheless.
But that also makes you a more human person.
Yes. Now, some of what I know you've spoken about the don'ts are really important to consider too.
Right. So I think the first one would be that we're not aware of what our self-brand is. We're not aware of the aura, the persona that we're projecting to other people. We're oblivious. Another one would be, in people's minds, living up to a stereotype of some kind. We're really not stereotypes. So what is there about us? It's like with the college professor. There are stereotypes about us being eggheads and nerds and all these other things. So what do we do to not be the stereotype? It's trying to show that we are a series of components. We're not one thing. We are a composite. Another one, which is a really big deal, is not being defensive. If somebody says something and you know that it's a weakness or that you hadn't thought of something and you don't have a great answer, don't immediately get into the defensive mode. Don't be obnoxious. Don't come back at somebody and try to one-up them with another comment. That's just terrible. And the last don't that I would have, and this is, again, I've said it a little bit up until now, but it's really important, is that there is no one self-brand that we have. I'm Joel the dad. I'm Joel the husband. I'm Joel the friend. I'm Joel the professor. I'm Joel the social media guru. In each case, I'm a different person with different attributes and different interactions. And in each instance, the person on the other side of me that I'm trying to reach has different expectations of me.
Right. That's such a good way of remembering our multiplicity and our multiple dimensions, because sometimes it works that someone will go, well, I haven't had the financial success of that person. Well, yes, but there's all the rest of you, and we're not really even assuming that financial success equals it being a wonderful person.
And in many cases, it's not the case.
Right. Or someone will be uncomfortable because they're going to be with people, and all of them have children except, let's say, that one person or that one couple. And the point is, that's not the only dimension. Remember all the rest of you. So I think it's such a good reminder to people that we are really, we have different brands, or really we're talking about different aspects of self and definitions of self in different categories. And
here's an easy way for people to think about it too. If I was to say, I want to be a good husband, what are the attributes that make me a good husband? If I say I want to be a great father, what are the attributes that make me a great father? And in both cases, am I fulfilling them? If I want to be seen as a great teacher, what do my students want from me? And am I delivering on that? So I think that's a great way in each role that we have is, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a friend? What do my friends expect from me? They expect me to be honest. They expect me to be there when they have a crisis. They expect me to be concerned about their life experiences, if they have a kid who's out of work, if they have a kid who's getting married. So in each situation, I think that's a great way to look at it. What is a dad? What is a mom? What is a social media guru? What's a professor? What's a CEO?
What you're inviting, which is so important, and it absolutely strengthens people's personality, their sense of self, their self-esteem, is that you're reinforcing self-reflection. And and so if a person's able to self-reflect, just as you said, on the different attributes to achieve we're calling it the brand, but the self that they really want to be, what a great dynamic.
And to do it in a positive way, not to be down on ourselves. What are our best attributes, and what do we need to be improved? Not, boy, I don't have a college degree. My job doesn't pay well. Let's not focus on that. We have a lot of different attributes.
It's a great point. So I guess it really can make sense, that I guess I want our listeners to know, if you think self-branding is difficult, you're not alone. I mean, you've said, Joel, you've asked people and professional people, friends. I was asking people today purposely, and everyone just sort of stopped dead for a minute when I said, well, think of five descriptions or five keywords that might describe you or the way you feel you are portrayed. And most people really just paused, because I don't think we even take that time to self-reflect. But it's a wonderful exercise not to have the five words and then the answer in a minute, but just the mulling over this and the thinking of it is a process that's enhancing your sense of self.
Absolutely. And I've been doing this hour presentation on self-branding for career growth. This is where I start out with the pad, and I ask them, write down 10 words that you'd like a potential employer to present yourself to a potential employer. Then I'll say, okay, write down 5 reasons why that employer should hire you. But you can't use a cliche. You can't say team player, highly motivated. You've got to pick out 5 things that are different from what everybody else is saying. And
That's
what
great.
happens is, what I think is a 5-minute exercise, they're 20 minutes into it.
Yes, yeah, it's great. Well, you really, again, everything we've been saying about self-branding, like how do I want to be a good dad? What are the components of that? Do I want to be a good friend? What are the qualities I show as a friend? The qualities I show, as a spouse, as a boyfriend. So now we're thinking, what are the qualities I'm going to bring to an employer? And the labels, team player, great manager, they just don't do it because anybody can say that.
Well, they're part of the equation, but that's not what's going to get me hired.
Yes.
In this environment where there could be 50 or 100 people that are applying for a given job, or more than that, it's going to be the things that are distinctive. So how do I help people with that? One tip that I give them is I say, I hope that you have a LinkedIn account. And if you go to LinkedIn and you go to the top of your home page, there'll be a thing that says jobs. Click on jobs. Type in the title of whatever it is that you like to be getting a job in. Then go and look at the jobs that are open, not because you're applying for them, but you're going to look at the description for each one, and you're going to pull out the types of things that they're looking for that you haven't thought of, that you possess, that an employer wants. Because that's one way of coming up with things that are not cliches.
That's great. We're going to stop here. It's terrific. We're going to take a brief break. You've been listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio. We're talking about self-branding. We're going to come back and continue talking about self-branding for our professional careers. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Psych Up on Casozo Radio. We have a very interesting show. We were just speaking about self-branding for professional success and enhancement. And Dr. Evans was just giving us a way, I think a very concrete and interesting way, to move beyond just calling ourselves the typical good manager, team player. He was mentioning that for every job, 100 people are applying. They're all saying that. So how do you distinguish yourself? And I wonder if you could share that technique one more time for our listeners.
Sure. I encourage everybody to be on LinkedIn. That is the professional networking. So if the listeners are not in LinkedIn, it's really simple to do. It's inexpensive. This is one of the best ways that we can create our professional brand. And what happens these days is, because there are so many tens of millions of people that are on LinkedIn, that one of the first places potential employers may go to look you up is your LinkedIn profile, which is why you've got to have some of these points that we've talked about. But what I recommended was that if you're in LinkedIn, one of the tabs they have when you're in your home page is jobs. And you could go in and you could type the name of a job. So you could type that you want to be a social media analyst. You want to be a financial analyst, whatever it may be, okay? You're not doing this exercise that I'm suggesting to get a job. You're doing it to build your profile by understanding what the requirements are for the job that you're applying for. So let's say that you do financial analyst, and you know, and then one of the boxes off on the side, because you're allowed to give parameters, would be, junior, mid-level, and senior. So depending upon what level you're at, you really ought to check that box because that would be tailored more for you. So let's say financial analyst. Let's say you're in a beginning job, and you type in those words, and you've got 200 job openings that are available, and you go into them, and each one of them is going to give a full job description, what the job it consists of, what attributes they're looking for the candidate. So they'll talk about whether they want a bachelor's degree, 5 years experience, if it's a financial analyst, whether maybe you've gotten one of the certified financial planner titles or something. So it gives you a good sense of what the job is, because you may not have a complete grasp of what the job is. And it gives you a way to say, these are the things that are important to the company. And then you can go, that's me. That's me. That's me. Mm-hmm. And you can pull those out and you can add it to the team player or whatever, so you're becoming much more specific to the job. Now, the question that comes up, and I was kidding around to you off air, was that I've looked at thousands of resumes. And probably the biggest thing that people do wrong, two things are: one, they haven't done those bullet points of the summary at the top. They just get right into education or right into experience, so that the reader has no idea what the orientation is of the person. And you could say, well, I'm doing that because I want it to be as broad as possible so that I have a chance at the job. In this case, the broader you are, the faster you get knocked out. You have to be targeted. You're in a competitive environment. The other thing that people do, the one that really drives me completely nuts, is that they have quarter-inch margins, feel like they have to have the entire page filled up, could be using a 9 or 10-point font, and they're doing that for jobs they had part-time in college, so that they're not differentiating between the jobs that are important and the ones that aren't.
Let me ask you, so if I'm a listener, I think that you just said one of the things that resume should have when they look at it is at the beginning, based on that job, they should see 4 bullet points extremely relevant with having attributes or descriptors that would make an employer immediately say, this is the potential guy.
And because we're doing this in reverse chronological order, the job we had 10 years ago doesn't get the same amount of verbiage and bullet points as the one that we have now. Which is another
and what
thing
if I don't have a
drives
job
me
now?
crazy. Okay,
so
well now,
but
let's suppose that you're a recent college graduate.
Right,
so you're talking about the skills that you've developed. I've given suggestions like this. I say that the rule of thumb is that the resume should be a page, and it really should be readable and highlights. However, that does not mean in your quest to be different that you can't take the best paper that you've ever written and do an abstract of it that relates to the job or functions related to the job and attach that. No one does that. And that's showing your best skill that's non-workplace related, because you may not have that. And I get students that, really? Can I do that?
It gives them a little glimpse of you.
And your skill set that you may not have worked in an actual paid job, but you have done a master's thesis on social media analytics, and this is what you've done, and these are the methods that you've used, and it's a 120-page paper, so it shows that you could write. So everybody has something like that, and you would emphasize. And if you don't have job experience, you should be emphasizing the courses that you've taken. You should be emphasizing the leadership positions you've had at school, not that you were in the choir or you ran track. Wow. It's leadership. If you were the captain of the track team, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, what if, in other words, these are things that should be in it, but these would not necessarily be your bullet points, or yes, they would in terms of if you don't have a lot of other experience. Your academic success, your athletic success, your studying abroad, those might be if you can find the way to make them relevant to the job.
Okay, first, to me, there were two sets of bullet points. One is the things at the top that are, telling what type of job you're looking for and highlighting what your skills are. This is 5 or 10 words that could describe us. That goes at the top. Then we're talking about in the resume bullet points that are relating. But if somebody has traveled extensively, for a lot of companies that may be a positive because more and more companies are becoming global. And even if they're not global in terms of you're going to go overseas, they understand they're in a global environment. So I think that you can take, if you word it properly, I believe that you could take every job that you've had and you can take your education and you can create a persona for yourself that's great. So I had a student this past semester who was getting her MBA. And she said, what I really have a passion for is that I've been an artist and I really want to work in, art marketing. So I said, perfect. I said, let's combine the two of them. Come up with a one-page thing that describes an art project that you did, build up the business credentials, have a separate resume that goes to companies that are involved, museums, whatever, then take a second resume where you're looking for a pure marketing job and do the abstract of it.
We're going to take a brief break. You've been listening to Psych Up on Cosozo Radio. Our show tonight is on self-branding. We're with Dr. Joel Evans. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've been speaking about self-branding with Dr. Joel Evans, social media guru, and we've been talking about how do you really cull from your prior experience, even if you just graduated or if you've been in the field or you're changing careers, to really make a resume stand out as effective. What would you say, Dr. Evans?
Well, let me give an exercise that I give to my graduating students, which is similar to the way I introduce my self-branding talk, but amplified. So what I would ask them to do is to send me a list of the top 10 reasons why I should hire them for a specific job. And they would almost inevitably say, why do I have to give you 10? I could think of 5. I can't think of 10. And my answer is because the 10th one is more likely to be creative and something you hadn't thought about yourself than the first one. And that you really want to dig deeper in terms of the attributes that we have. We all have a lot more positive attributes than we give ourselves credit for.
Yes.
We just don't highlight them or think about them. They're subconscious. So that's why it drives them crazy. And I could see most of them end up with 8. And then when I write back to them and I say, I'm not going to look at it until I get the other 2.
What you're really forcing them to do is what we don't do enough, which is realizing there's gold in a lot of our experiences. And we just don't realize the relevance or how to make it relevant to a person who's looking at that resume. One of the things that we have to ask tonight, because we've been talking about personal self-branding in terms of how I want to come across to friends, family, spouse, or even in the professional world, am I locking myself into an identity?
No. And there are several reasons for that. The first one is that, as I've said a couple of times tonight, is that there is no one self-brand that we have. It depends on the situation. It's different if it's professional than family, than friends. So there is no one the brand that we have. And if we act that way, we're really making a mistake because there are different expectations in each role. The second major reason that I would give is that we're all evolving. When we're 25, we're not 45. When we're in an entry-level position, let's say in a CPA firm, and we're the last one in, and we're 24 years old, and we have our CPA, we're not the same person when we're 44 and we're a partner in the company. We're viewed with a whole different level of credibility, knowledge, responsibility. So our self-brand is always changing. To me, the most important part in the answering no to that is that we have to constantly reassess ourselves. And I know that, as I said before, that it can be painful. I do this myself all the time. I don't necessarily like all the thoughts I come up with about myself, but we do evolve. And, part of recognizing our weaknesses is that we want to improve them. And as we improve them, our self-brand evolves. And we want to make sure that we get it, how we've changed, and that we can then communicate that to other people how we've changed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me, in the interest of time, ask a very quick question. How could social media enhance or hurt our self-brand?
I think that just as we've talked about, we have different self-brands for different situations. We have different self-brands for different social media. And it is important to recognize that our self-brand on Facebook is different than on LinkedIn. On Facebook, it's more informal, it's more friendly, it's more chit-chatty, whereas on LinkedIn, it's more formal, it's more accomplishment-related, it's more tangible. And what we have to realize is that even though those are two separate things, and we're allowed to have a personal life that's separate from our professional life, that just as many potential employers are going to look up our Facebook page as are going to look up the LinkedIn page. So that we definitely have to be careful of the types of things that we're doing. I'll give an example, and I'll keep it PG. I had a student of mine who signed up to follow me on Twitter, and I saw that she had a Twitter account, and I always like to go and see what the other person is doing before I say, okay, even if it's my own student. So I go and I click the URL that she's got linked to a Twitter account, and I'm horrified over this thing because it's talking about personal issues that should not be out there under any scenario. So
we only have about another minute, so really...
Okay, I said to her after class, you got to take it down. She said, I didn't even remember that I had it up.
People put it up so quick they don't remember and they don't realize the damage. Thank you so much, Dr. Evans. It's been a terrific show. Thank you, Ezra Baker, our producer. And of course, thank our listeners. If you want to contact me, please do at psychup@casozo.com. We'll be back next week with another show. We hope you'll be listening.
The contents of this site and program are for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing found on our website is intended to be a substitute for professional psychological,